The 2020s are half over. Let's rank all the JRPGs they've given us so far. What do you think? Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon, and it's this time of year that tends to make me pretty reflective. I mean, I'm not special there. It kind of happens to everyone. At least around where I live, the days are super short and the weather is actively trying to kill us 24/7. So we just want to sit inside and think about things. And I'm thinking about how, holy crap, the 2020s are halfway done. As a JRPG fan, I've been super thankful for the 2020s because they've brought me a whole lot of enjoyment and positivity. Not only have there been some all-timer games, but I started doing YouTube and getting to interact with so many cool people and make so many new friends. I don't want to make this a mushy mush fest though, so let's just focus on the games, shall we? There are a few dozen JRPGs that have debuted since the year 2020, and I want to definitively rank all of the best of them. So here's how I'm going to do this. First, I'm going to run down the entire list of games and talk about them for a minute or so, just going year by year. And then once I'm done with that, we'll start the ranking process. Sound good? Good. I'm imagining you said it sounds good because I wouldn't be able to continue otherwise. I set these traps for myself. So, all right. First up, the best JRPGs of the year 2020. This was the real Persona 5. Sorry to any OG Persona 5 stands out there, but Persona 5 Royal took that amazing base game and kicked everything up several dozen notches. The combat was more refined and finally made the addition of guns in battle feel useful. The story was expanded with an entirely new endgame chapter, and the character roster grew, taking an already great cast and turning it into perfection. This game both shows how amazing Atlus can be as a developer, while simultaneously revealing how crappy they can be with the way they release games. There's no reason this shouldn't have just been Persona 5 from the get-go, but that doesn't change the amazing experience that was this game. To say I was slobbering over this game prior to release is an understatement. I was verifiably drowning in drool. Is that gross? That's too gross. I'm sorry. I'm going to run this by an editor next time. But Final Fantasy VII is my favorite Final Fantasy world, and I was so looking forward to seeing it done up as an absolutely gorgeous, modern AAA game. And I was not disappointed. Final Fantasy VII Remake delivered all the major story points of the original, while giving us an almost entirely new story at the same time. It's hard to explain without spoiling it, but suffice to say, if you're a fan of the original and open-minded about what the word remake means, then you'll get it. The combat abandons the tried and true turn-based system from the original, but replaces it with an evolution of the hybrid action turn-based found in games like Kingdom Hearts. And it comes the closest of any game to replicating the beauty of the combat in the movie Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, which is a high I think Square Enix have been chasing for a long time. This game absolutely 100% captured my imagination, and it was a grueling 4 years to wait for the sequel. As someone who missed out on Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii due to having kind of fallen off of video games for a while, but also as someone who considers himself a gigantic fan of Takahashi's Xeno series, I dove into the definitive edition on Switch with what I can only describe as gusto. This game was a masterpiece. This giant open world was somehow possible on the Wii, but looked so incredible on the Switch. And the story, this was exactly what I was hoping for. I could feel the ties to the broader Xeno story in this first game pretty strongly, and those ties have only gotten stronger as more games have been released, which makes me even more excited for the series to continue. And this is absolutely the best place to get started. The cliffhanger that ends Trails of Cold Steel 3 should have been illegal. That sort of cliffhanger is basically the video game equivalent of torture, which I'm pretty sure was outlawed by the Geneva Convention, so what I'm saying is Falcom should be put on trial. But we finally got sweet relief when Trails of Cold Steel 4 hit in 2020. It didn't do too much new gameplay-wise compared to its predecessor, but that's not a bad thing, given that Trails of Cold Steel 3 had already so significantly enhanced the series' gameplay to such a high level. The revelations in the story were enormous, and the implications for what was to come left most of us fans on the edge of our seats, but in a less painful way than Cold Steel 3 did. So that's 2020. Before we dive into 2021, do me a favor and stick around for a quick word about the sponsor of this video, FlexiSpot. My space down here in the game room has been getting pretty stagnant. It took me doing a room tour video recently for me to really get just how cramped it felt and how honestly uncomfortable it was. The biggest culprit was my extremely old and extremely nasty sectional sofa. Holy cow, you guys, I do not like that thing. It gave me great pleasure to tear it apart with my bare hands, let me tell you. But I needed something to sit on because I'm a human man with a human man body. And I'm not about to play Metaphor Refantasio standing up. That would hurt my back. And honestly, all of me, my everything. I hate standing. Standing is the worst. Anyway, I worked with a company called FlexiSpot before on this channel, so I knew they made a comfortable desk chair. And since they know chairs, I figured they'd be the people to go to for this problem. And I was 100% right. This is the FlexiSpot Lotus Swivel Rocker Recliner. I knew I wanted a recliner, but I didn't want something like my dad's old Lazy Boy, even though I am a lazy boy, it's an apt name. But I'm crazy about the design of the Lotus. Putting it together was a snap, and that's coming from a guy who absolutely dreads putting furniture together. It's so straightforward and easy. The Lotus is an oversized 20.9-inch seat with 9.8-inch armrests, but these, again, aren't my dad's armrests. I gotta stop bringing up my dad. People are going to think I have daddy issues. I don't have daddy issues. I'm fine. Anyway, the armrests are low and soft so they can accommodate my preferred sitting style, which naturally is crisscross applesauce. I love how fluidly it moves too. I can easily swivel to reach games on my shelf. And I knew I wanted a rocker, and this baby rocks. I can settle in, shut my eyes, and pretend my dad is gently rocking me to sleep. Okay, nope. That's the last time dad is coming up in this video. I'm making an appointment with my therapist. I have the electric model. You can also get it in a standard variety, and it makes it so effortless to kick back and relax. I normally have a hard time falling asleep in chairs, but this one, it's kind of dangerous to have this in the room where I'm supposed to be working. My productivity is taking a hit because I just want to nap in this thing. I'm also a sucker for a chair with features. Aside from the power recline, this thing has a storage compartment so I can store all sorts of secret stuff. Or like the remote, I guess. I don't really have any secret stuff. And since it's an electric recliner, that means it has power. And that means it's got charging ports built in. No more fumbling around behind my side table trying to plug in a charger. I just pop the cord right in. It's the little conveniences that make life in 21st century America tolerable. Wouldn't you agree? The Lotus comes in a variety of colors. I went with slate blue because I like a more subtle look, and this fits in super nicely with my decor. It looks great and it's super comfortable. Naturally, my wife and my dog wasted no time at all in commandeering it. If you're in the market for a new recliner, you absolutely should check out FlexiSpot. I'm loving this chair, and if you want one of your own, click the link below and use code LOTUS30 for $30 off plus free shipping. You won't be disappointed. Thanks to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. Okay, back to it. The Ys series was revitalized with the release of Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana, and it feels like it really perfected itself with Ys 9 Monstrum Nox. Not only does this game give us an adventure with Adol that's furthest along in his timeline so far, giving us a protagonist that's much more mature and world-weary than any other entry, but it's got fully refined combat and some of the coolest traversal in any action RPG. Adol and his party are basically superheroes trapped in this giant city, and you can run up walls and leap and glide everywhere, and it's just a whole lot of fun to get around in this game. The story is also a strong point, and the central mystery of it all was one with an answer I genuinely didn't see coming. Ys 9 and Ys 8 are constantly duking it out in my head for the role of my favorite Ys game, and that's been made even more complicated by the release of Ys 10, which I'll get to later. Truly one of the greatest action RPG series at the top of its game. It does sometimes happen that when Atlas strikes gold with a game, they overplay their hand in their enthusiasm to give the people more of what they want. But that doesn't apply to Persona 5 Strikers. This is not some quick and easy cash grab capitalizing on the popularity of the P5 characters. This is a straight-up sequel to Persona 5. The cast is all here, minus some new friends we made in Persona 5 Royal, sadly. and they're on a road trip, which means this is less a game about managing your time and more a game about going on an adventure and kicking a bunch of shadows in their big dumb butts. Yeah, the combat is different too. It's a Musou game this time. Basically a game in the style of Dynasty Warriors, where you face off against hundreds of enemies all at once in action RPG combat, but you have the skills necessary to make that, doable. This game makes me a bit sad we never got something quite like it for Persona 4, honestly. It's an absolute blast. Every time I hear people online complain about Final Fantasy abandoning turn-based gameplay, I want to shake them by the shoulders and ask them why they're not playing Bravely Default. This is the heir apparent to Final Fantasy. The first game even had the subtitle Flying Fairy because they wanted something with the initials FF to signify the role the series would be taking at Square Enix. Bravely Default 2 just beautifully moves the series forward with gameplay that scratches the old school itch while still having pretty much every modern convenience under the sun. This game has one of the few implementations of the classic Final Fantasy job system that I genuinely like, too. The story is charming and the visuals are stylized and gorgeous. Seriously, the reports of the death of Final Fantasy have been greatly exaggerated. It's just changed its name, and it's in the Witness Protection Program. Tales of Arise shifts quite a bit about the Tales series in ways that some fans maybe were not crazy about, but honestly, I was on board with the changes. It doesn't drastically depart from the series' storytelling style. You're still dealing with an oppressed group of people rising up against their oppressor, like in most Tales games, but the story feels even darker edged here. The shift in combat is maybe the most noticeable difference, and while it definitely departs from most of the mainline Tales of games, it carves out a strong identity of its own. Turning the series' traditional skit scenes into essentially motion comics was such a welcome addition, too. No longer are you just looking at talking anime heads on a screen. These scenes feel so much more fleshed out and interesting now. It's been quite a while since we've seen anything new from the Tales of franchise. I'm glad we're getting all these remasters lately, but still, I hope Bandai Namco has a new entry in the oven too. The original Blue Reflection is an underappreciated gem of a JRPG. The sequel, Blue Reflection Second Light, is a straight-up masterclass in how to iterate on a sequel the right way. This is the story of a bunch of magical girls that find themselves stranded in a school on a mysterious island and forced to confront their traumas in the form of dungeons based on their experiences. And if the word traumas didn't tip you off, it goes to some pretty dark places. The storyline is amazing, but I think even more so, the gameplay really shines here. Battles are reminiscent of Grandia in a way, but so much more expansive in ways that allow you, or even require you, to be extremely strategic. The graphics are beautiful, the soundtrack is a masterpiece, and there are so many optional interactions between the characters that you can seek out to fill out their characters even more. I would say, do not sleep on this game based on the premise. I consider it an actual masterpiece, and more people need to try it. Okay, that's all for 2021. On to 2022. This is one of the masterpieces of the Super Nintendo era that we completely missed out on in the West. And it's one of the biggest surprises of the 2020s that we got a beautiful HD remake of the thing. Live Alive is like a JRPG book of short stories. 8 different mini JRPGs you can go through in the order you want. The battle system is pretty unique for Square Enix, using a sort of grid-based system for positioning with the otherwise standard turn-based combat. The stories are where the game really shines, though. They cover a ton of character types and even eras. One takes place back in prehistoric times, and all the dialogue is basically delivered through grunts and symbols. Another takes place in Imperial China, where you control a master martial artist looking to find a successor. Another takes place in the distant future and almost completely forgoes combat as you control a robot trying to save the crew of its spaceship. There's just so much variety on display, and even though every story is very self-contained, it's a lot of fun to try and find the common thread that connects them all. Xenoblade 3 is to me the culmination of not just the story of the Xenoblade series, but all the gameplay mechanics as well. It takes the mechanically very cool but practically very complex battle system of its predecessor and refines it so that it doesn't require copious research to fully understand. And it makes even things like side quests feel actually thought out and intentional. In my opinion, it has the strongest of the self-contained stories of all the Xenoblade games, and its DLC, which I know some people almost think of as its own game, but that DLC is some of the finest storytelling in video games, period. The Xenoblade subseries couldn't have asked for a better conclusion than this, and I'm so excited to see where Takahashi takes Xeno next. I used to apologize for bringing up Harvestella so much on this channel, but I am all out of sorries. Sorry. Harvestella is an overlooked masterpiece of a video game. It's a story-rich action RPG with some of the trappings of a farming simulator, though it was marketed as just the opposite, which turned off a lot of the more hardcore JRPG crowd, while simultaneously letting down the farming sim crowd who didn't think there was enough farming. It stinks that the marketing failed so strongly for this one because it is truly one of my all-time favorite video games. It's a double A title, so you won't necessarily find the tightest gameplay or highest polygon counts, but it more than makes up for that in the story, the characters, in the freaking art design. It just looks freaking gorgeous, and YouTube videos can't fully do it justice. It's such an intriguing and powerful story, and I've kind of made it my mission on this platform to convince as many people as possible to try it. Just try it. I really do think you'll be surprised. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this look back at the 2020s in JRPGs, would you mind giving the video a like? And if you aren't already subscribed, that really does help me out a ton, so please consider that. Oh, and if you like JRPG podcasts, I have one. It's called the JRPG Pursuit, and we put out new episodes about JRPGs every single Wednesday. Link is in the description. Okay, on to 2023. For a relatively new Fire Emblem fan like me, Fire Emblem Engage was exactly what I needed to really get into the series. A lot of people came on board with Fire Emblem with 3 houses, including myself, but whereas many of them fell in love with the school life simulator interspersed with tactical battles, I wasn't as crazy about it. Fire Emblem Engage was a much more straightforward strategy RPG. Sure, you still had a hub where you could run around and talk to your teammates, but there was significantly less bloat to the design, which keeps the focus on the battles. And the battles are really why you should play Fire Emblem. In terms of turn-based tactical combat, it's arguable that Fire Emblem does it best, and Engage is Fire Emblem operating on all cylinders. I also appreciated having a voiced main character, the lack of which really bugged me in 3 houses. Engage is absolutely a worthy entry in the series, and it's currently my favorite. When Octopath Traveler came out on the Switch, it created an entire subgenre, isn't quite the right word. It gave us HD 2D, which is a pretty distinctive repackaging of the classic 90s era 3D worlds and 2D character style. The reason subgenre isn't the right word for it is there have been a variety of genres that have had their turn in HD 2D, but Octopath Traveler was the first. Octopath Traveler 2 had the benefit of feedback from the original, and it seemed to take it to heart. Most of the issues that commonly came up about the first game were addressed in the sequel, which basically makes it Octopath Traveler, but better in every way. It's gone on to become one of the most beloved games of the 2020s, and even though I'm not as crazy about it, check out the end of my Octopath Traveler 0 review if you're curious about why that is. I can still acknowledge quality when I see it. It took so long to get Final Fantasy XV that I wasn't even expecting 16 to launch in my lifetime. But what do you know? Yoshi P and his team at Square Enix managed to get it done. And what they gave us is something not quite like any Final Fantasy that's come before. For one thing, it's a full-on action game now. I think the RPG elements present aren't that much more significant than what you would find in most any other action games these days, so I hesitate to even call it an action RPG. It's action. And you know what? That's fine. Final Fantasy hasn't really had a solid identity of its own since Final Fantasy 9 or 10. It's become the series that Square Enix uses to experiment in extravagant AAA fashion, and there's nothing wrong with that, contrary to what angry internet people might have you believe. You might argue it shouldn't be in this video, what with this being about JRPGs, but I'm gonna grandfather it in due to the legacy, you know. It's a dark, heavy, M-rated story that marries the best of Japanese role-playing storytelling with the best of Western fantasy philosophy, and it really nails its aesthetic. It's not my favorite Final Fantasy, but I appreciate it for what it is and what it's done. Trails into Reverie shows what Falcom can do when they break out of the cycle of a particular arc of Trails storytelling. Reverie is the culmination of everything that had come before it, the Sky Trilogy, the Crossbell Duology, and the Cold Steel Tetralogy? It takes the formula and chucks it out the window to give us a three-pronged story that comes together in one of the most epic showdowns in the series' history. Well, I should say it chucks the regular Trails formula out the window. It actually closely resembles Trails in the Sky the Third, which was the first game in the Trails series to deviate from what had come before it. But where Sky the Third followed the team through a basically virtual space, letting them relive their traumas and giving us, the audience, a peek into their backstories, Reverie puts the central narrative at the center, where its name suggests it should go. The side stories and fun shorts are still present just as they were in Sky the Third, but there's a much stronger narrative holding it all together. Not to mention, this game has what must be the largest cast of playable characters in any traditional JRPG. Seriously, the roster is enormous. Almost every character that has ever been around is here. It's nuts. It's maybe too many characters. But it's another Falcom masterpiece, and it sets the stage for what was to come quite nicely. Next up, 2024. If Final Fantasy VII Remake was The Hobbit, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is The Lord of the Rings. We're talking a story and a world that expand exponentially. The leap from Remake to Rebirth is shocking. Just like its predecessor, Rebirth continues to retell the story of Final Fantasy VII while at the same time establishing its own identity and story, leaving us with the biggest mystery of all. How exactly does this all end? The combat is even better refined in this one, and now your characters can team up for attacks that are both flashy and super effective. The tweaks to the combat system filled some of the minor holes the previous game left, and it raises the already high watermark to even higher heights. It was my game of the year in 2024, which is a big deal because 2024 was a year of amazing JRPGs. The introduction of Van Arkwright as the new protagonist in Trails Through Daybreak brought with it the biggest and best refresh we've seen yet. Nothing against Reen Schwarzer from Cold Steel, but he'd been with us for so long. It was great to get some new blood involved, and Van is charming and hilarious, and harder edge than any protagonist we've had before in this series. The gameplay also got the biggest upgrade yet. Now you have the option of action combat in addition to turn-based. You can attack enemies on the field, dodge, and at the press of a button, jump into turn-based mode at will. It's the best evolution the series has seen, and the arc this game sets up has so far been spectacular. Trails Through Daybreak may be my favorite game in the series, though admittedly, another game coming up in this video may have supplanted it, but it's still a masterpiece. Sometimes a game of true and absolute beauty comes from a big publisher like Square Enix, and it just kind of falls by the wayside. I already mentioned Harvestella, and now Visions of Mana gets added to that same list. This is the continuation of the Mana series, and it's a fairly brilliant work of art that has not gotten the attention it deserves. Visions of Mana tells a heavy story about self-sacrifice, but it does it through the lens of pure optimism. It takes place in one of the most colorful and vibrant worlds I've seen yet in a JRPG, and it marries that beautiful setting with challenging combat. Really, if you passed on this one for whatever reason, you need to grab it and give it a chance. It had the misfortune of coming out in a year with so many big titles, and it really deserves a second look. Calling Metaphor Refantatio the fantasy persona is not inaccurate. It takes most of the time management gameplay from that series, along with a version of the press turn combat system from the broader Shin Megami Tensei series, and crafts a visually stunning story about succession and betrayal in a really cool fantasy world. Also, it has a main character who actually has a voice. Yes, I am going to talk about silent protagonists again. If you're playing the drinking game, drink now. Most Atlas games have a voiceless hero, but Metaphor gives him a voice, while still letting you as the player shape how he responds. It eliminates the awkwardness that comes in voice conversations between non-player characters and the protagonist. I love it. Also, it takes a page out of Trails Through Daybreak's book and adds optional action combat in addition to turn-based. Here's hoping Atlas plans more from this IP, because I think they have something really good on their hands. Ys 10 Nordics is a pretty big departure from the recent Ys games. The combat is weightier and much more based on blocking than on fancy dodging, and instead of a big party of characters to swap between, you only have two, Adol and Karja. They find themselves magically joined together, and in order to separate themselves for good, they have to get to the bottom of some mysterious attacks by these monster guys called the Grieger. Not only do you get the typical fast-paced action and traversal you'd expect in an Ys game here, but there's also an entirely separate system surrounding your ship. You'll trick it out and fight naval battles as you make your way around the region, and you'll explore islands to find treasures and new crew members. I love how the Ys series can do things like this, kind of completely reinvent itself in a lot of ways, while still fundamentally feeling like an Ys game. It's a top tier entry and definitely worth checking out. Though, maybe hold out for the upcoming re-release, Ys 10 Proud Nordics, since that's going to have even more content. Technically, Fantasian came out earlier than this on Apple Arcade, but you know what? I'm not counting that. Doesn't count. Fantasian Neo Dimension comes to us from a partnership between Mistwalker Studios and Square Enix, which means the creator of Final Fantasy and the rights holder of Final Fantasy are working together again. Fantasian has you jumping between dimensions, trying to save the world, with a cast full of characters that feel like they could have fallen out of a classic Final Fantasy game. The combat system is turn-based with a twist. A lot of attacks follow paths, and you can adjust your attacks to try and hit as many enemies as possible at once. And you can use a device to capture and store random battles so that you can avoid them when you're not in the mood, and then knock out all the enemies at once in a big free-for-all when you feel like it. It's a really ambitious game with a very cool art style. All the backgrounds are actual real-life dioramas created by hand, though admittedly the resolution on the photos is a bit lacking on an HD television. Still, highly recommend you check it out. We are closing in on the end, and then the ranking begins. Here's 2025. Trails Through Daybreak 2 has been sort of the black sheep of the series for a while now. Having played it this past year, I don't fully understand why. It does sort of break series tradition, where the second entry in an arc is basically just a more fully expanded version of what the previous entry was. The setup here is different than most other Trails games, and honestly, it has a bit more in common with Trails into Reverie. Your characters spend a lot of time split up, and their separate adventures eventually collide at the end. The combat is the same as in its predecessor, but slightly more refined, and really, this is just more Trails. Some people feel like the plot was spinning its wheels in this one, but I don't think that's true. I think it's laying the groundwork for what's to come in Trails Beyond the Horizon in January. Look, even if you want to say this game is a lower tier Trails game, it's still an A game, right? It's still Trails. It's still Falcom crushing it. It's great. Xenoblade Chronicles X was for a long time the only reason I held onto a Wii U. It's basically a masterpiece level game that was stranded on the worst performing Nintendo home console. And for a long time, it was a shame. It didn't seem like we were ever going to see this game escape that prison. But fortunately, Monolith Soft decided to make things right, and we have not only the original game brought over to the Switch, but a bunch of new content thrown in as well. The open world in this game is one of my all-time favorites. The sense of exploration is basically unmatched in any other game, especially once you get the chance to fly around in giant robots. The fact that this ran on the Wii U at all is a testament to the skills of the developer. It's lighter on the story front than other Xeno games, but the story it tells is still extremely cool. And yeah, some of the music is corny as heck, but you know what? Sometimes I'm in a corny mood. I love this game so much. I felt like this game just came out of nowhere. I remember seeing it debut at some Xbox event, which I was not watching live because why would I, as a JRPG fan? But right away, I could tell this was going to be special. It tells one of the most deep and thought-provoking stories that I've ever seen told in this genre, and it matches that with combat that feels completely fresh and new. The combat uses timed button presses for attacks and defending, and it's particularly crucial on defense. You can dodge attacks, or if you're feeling risky, you can try and parry them. There are few things as satisfying as finally nailing a parry on a difficult boss attack, I can promise you that. It's one of the best games of the year, and honestly, it's likely to win Game of the Year. I'm recording this prior to the Game Awards, so if you're watching it after, I guess we know the answer to that now. But seriously, this is a work of genius and an absolute must-play. Atelier Yumiya kind of upends the Atelier series in some significant ways. There's still a big focus on synthesizing items using alchemy, but the combat is closer to action than the turn-based systems in the previous games. Combat lets you map special moves to different face buttons and use them on cooldown. It's fast-paced and exciting, though I'll admit to missing the turn-based combat myself. Still, the world of Yumiya is enormous and beautiful, and there's just so much to see and do in it that I don't mind that the combat isn't my favorite. I also found the story and characters much more compelling than I typically find in Atelier games. It's got a bit of an edge to it, nowhere near dark, but a bit more gritty and real feeling. I'm enticed enough by this game that I'm excited to see where the sub-series goes next. Trails in the Sky First Chapter is my game of the year 2025. It's an outright incredible work of art. It refreshes the original 20-year-old game into something that plays modern and feels timeless. By staying 100% faithful to the original story, it avoids the pitfall of creating plot holes for later games in the series, but it also shows just how solid the storytelling was in the original game to begin with. This was a game that was good enough that it didn't need a remake, but the results of Falcom putting in the work are one of the greatest JRPGs ever made. It's got the most refined version of the new Trails action turn-based hybrid combat, and graphically it's far and away the prettiest game in the series. The music, the actors, the presentation, just amazing. The English version is let down a bit by a localization that starts off pretty weak, but gets stronger as time goes by. But aside from that, this should be in every JRPG fan's library. This is where you should start the Trails series, with the beginning, and with the best entry yet. The line between remaster and remake is pretty thin these days. In some ways, you could argue Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles is really just a remaster. It's not like there's a ton of new content in here, and it looks like I remember Final Fantasy Tactics looking. But in reality, it's an enormous upgrade. The mechanics have been streamlined and made much easier to understand for tactics dummies like me. The graphics are actually quite a bit nicer than they've ever been, and the addition of top-tier voice acting means the story comes across clearer and better than ever before. I was honestly blown away. I had tried several times over the years to get into Final Fantasy Tactics. I know a lot of people consider it their favorite Final Fantasy, and it always bugged me that I just couldn't get over the hump. But this game finally let me break through, and it's really a remarkable experience. We somehow got 2 Atelier games in 2025, and they're both actually fantastic, just in very different ways. Atelier Yumiya was all about breaking off in a bold new direction, but Atelier Wrestleriana is more about sticking to tradition. This is an old-school turn-based JRPG with, of course, a bunch of required alchemy in order to progress. It also feels more like a budget title than Yumiya did, but it's still a fantastic entry in the series. The story is a bit lighter, especially compared to Yumiya, but it has entertaining characters and a lot of cameos from other games in the series, which fans who have played more games than I have will appreciate more. I got fully sucked into this one, and I can easily recommend it as a starting point for the series if you're curious what Atelier is all about. Yeah, you won't know who all the characters are, but that's totally fine. The other characters in the story don't either. I never felt lost with my limited Atelier knowledge, so don't let that stop you. I had high hopes for Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake. For one, Dragon Quest 1 was my first ever JRPG, and for another, Dragon Quest 2 has been one of my favorites in the series so far. Fortunately, Square Enix just absolutely knocked it out of the park with this one. These 2 games back to back are some of the best JRPG experiences I've had this year. The remake of 1 fills out the story and world of the original game so significantly that it almost feels like an entirely new experience. That's not a bad thing, honestly, since the original game was about as bare bones as a JRPG can be. Dragon Quest II takes the already rich narrative and makes it exponentially deeper and more involved. There are more characters, more story beats, and a conclusion that so beautifully ties together the entire Erdrick trilogy of games. Playing these made me sincerely hope we'll be getting Dragon Quest 4, 5, and 6 redone soon, because this team knows what they're doing with this series. I think we were all a little afraid at first about Octopath Traveler 0 because we knew it was based on the mobile game, Champions of the Continent. It wasn't entirely clear what based on meant, but having played it for review, I can say this is not a mobile game. Whatever it was about it that made it mobile is not present here. This is just pure Octopath Traveler storytelling with even more refined combat. Battles are bigger than ever since now you can have 8 characters in battle at one time. It seems like that would be unmanageable, but it's actually super easy to get the hang of. The stories really shine here, and I think what helps it stand apart from the games that came before is that there's a strong story thread running throughout all the stories. They don't just feel like disconnected plots that all happen to take place in the same world. There's continuity of characters and events, and there are stakes that are much bigger than the typically personal stakes of the other games. I cannot recommend this game enough. If you're at all interested in Octopath as a series, this is a must-play. Okay, that was a lot of games, but obviously there have been a lot of tremendous JRPGs in the last 6 years? Yeah, 6 years. Crazy. Now, you're probably going to notice right away some missing games from this list, right? For one, I completely excluded all indie JRPGs. I could do an entire separate list on just indie JRPGs in the last, 5 or 6 years that I think would be, maybe that's actually a good idea for a video. Maybe I'll do that. Let me know in the comments if you think I should do that. But for the purposes of this and to keep it a little bit more manageable, it's already been like 30 minutes leading up to this ranking. So I don't know how manageable it would have been. Crazy to include it all here. So we are just going with the, big publisher JRPGs. Also, I'm sure that I missed some that you are scratching your heads as to like, why would I not include this particular game, whatever it is. 2 reasons I might not have included a game you're thinking of. 1, I didn't play it at all. I have no experience with it, and I maybe even forgot that it was a game. Or 2, I didn't think it was very good. I wanted to just rank the best of the best so that we could really have, a top tier list of all of the best JRPGs of the decade so far. So here you see we've got the traditional S through D ranking. And I want to be very clear about something right up front. If a game is listed in D on this particular tier, that does not mean it is a bad game. It is just a D-ranked game out of all of the best JRPGs of the last 6 years, right? That's what that means. It doesn't mean it's bad. It has to be good to even make its way onto this list. It has to be good to begin with. So with that caveat in mind, let's get started. I don't know how to do this. I could do it in chronological order. No, I think I just want to kind of do it randomly. We're just going to kind of randomly go around the assortment of games here and just let the vibes lead the way. We're going to let the vibes dictate how we go about this. So I'm vibing right now with Metaphor Refantatio. Really great game. I have enjoyed what I've played of it. I have not, however, played a ton of it. I've played enough to know that it's great, but not enough for me to be like, this is one of the greatest JRPGs that has ever been. So, I don't know. For me right now, I think I would put it as a B. And I might tweak these as I go, as I think through things more fully, but my gut instinct is this is great, but it hasn't blown my mind. Obviously, I was able to slip away from it. There were reasons that I had to put it aside, other games that I needed to get to for content reasons that I had, obligations to get to sooner. And I just haven't gone back to it yet. But the fact that I haven't gone back to it, I feel like it's a B for now. Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. This is good as well, but I feel like if I'm looking at not just the games of the last 6 years, but also the entirety of the Xenoblade saga, I honestly feel like Chronicles is maybe at the bottom of my list. Maybe that's controversial. I know some people, it's their favorite. And I'm obviously not saying it's a bad game. I would probably put it at a B. I think it's a B. And I think, Xenoblade Chronicles, I'll just go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off. I think 3 is an S tier for me. It is just Takahashi at the height of storytelling and the gameplay mechanics refined to just the most beautiful sheen, real extra tasty, crispy sort of gameplay. I think I would say from least favorite to favorite, Chronicles Definitive, Chronicles 2, X, 3. That's probably, you probably think, if you're a Xeno fan, you probably think that's crazy. Let me know how crazy you think it is down in the comments. All right, Fire Emblem Engage. So I do like this game quite a bit, especially compared to Three Houses. If I was putting Three Houses on this list, Three Houses would be a D for me. It's just, I didn't really connect with the story, and it just didn't do it for me. The school simulation thing, I'm kind of over that. I think Persona does it fine, but everybody else trying to imitate it is just a kind of a pale comparison. Kind of a pale comparison? Pales in comparison, I think, is the normal human way of saying that. I think Fire Emblem Engage on this list would be a C. I think it's a C. Because it is better than what I would consider Three Houses to be. But, you know, I'm also thinking about these in terms of replayability. Which ones do I most want to replay? And I don't feel super compelled to replay Engage. Xenoblade Chronicles X, I guess I already kind of talked about this, so I should probably just rank this one. I would consider it an A. I think that the story is incredibly intriguing, despite, you know, the popular consensus being that the story isn't as good or as fleshed out, the characters aren't as interesting. That's true to an extent, but I also think that, like, it does such a good job telling the macro story. The larger overall encompassing story I just find so incredible and intriguing that I'm still driven to play it. And like I said in my little spiel earlier, it's got like one of the most incredible open worlds in a video game. Like, I know everybody rants and raves about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and those are great, but I just feel like the sense of exploration, and particularly being able to explore it in vehicles like that, like, you know, either a ground vehicle or flying in a mech, like, nothing comes close to that in any other game that I've played. And also, by the way, Monolith Soft, maker of Xenoblade, worked on Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. So, like, if you like those open worlds, it's because this team knows how to make open worlds. So, Live Alive. Live Alive is very cool. I do enjoy the concept of it, right? The short story collection in JRPG form. I think, and I don't know if this is just a product of it being quite a long time since I played it. I haven't played it since it came out, and it's been a few years now. I feel like it's probably a C for me. It's very good, but like stacked up against the rest of these, I don't know. It doesn't quite make it. I wonder if I should find a D tier game, because I am kind of worried that, like, I'm doing this wrong, because if I'm truly ranking the best of the best, then there has to be a worst of the best, right? Right? The worst of the best of the best. That makes sense, right? Yeah. So the worst of the best, what would that be? Fantasian, Neo Dimension. Fantasian Neo Dimension is a great game, and I really enjoyed playing it. I would say the thing that takes a little bit of the joy out of it for me is the difficulty spike in the latter portion of the game. So when it was first released, it was released in 2 chapters on iOS. And there's a pretty clear, like, point where you can tell this is where the first chapter ended, this is where the second chapter begins. About 50% of the way through that second chapter, the difficulty just gets ridiculous, to the point where it's like, it's not even challenging, it's like, go and grind, and you know what I mean? Like, just spend a whole bunch of time making the numbers get bigger so that you can survive these things. That sucked a lot of the joy out of it for me. So I think it was a B tier game on this list up until the latter portion of the game. And that, I think, just knocks it down considerably. But again, still among the best of the best. So Persona 5 Royal. Persona 5 Royal is, I think, pretty close to like the epitome of the Persona experience. I do prefer Persona 4 slightly to Persona 5, which is why I'm really excited about Persona 4 Revival, because it's basically going to be retelling the story of Persona 4 in more of the style of Persona 5. I love the style, the UI, the combat in Persona 5 and Royal, but I like the story and the characters of 4 more. So I'm really excited for that. But Persona 5 Royal being basically a masterpiece, I would call it an A tier game. Final Fantasy 16. I went into something of a gaming depression. I don't think that's made its way into any medical dictionaries yet, but gaming depression is kind of what I felt after I finished Final Fantasy 16. Some of it was, I mean, a lot of it was the story. It felt not unsatisfying, but just kind of a friggin' bummer, man. Like, the whole game is just very dark and heavy and oppressive, and there's just so little hope in the world of this game. It is just like an exercise in suffering. And I feel like that's the impression I get from a lot of Western fantasies, which is part of the reason I'm not a big fan of Western fantasies in general. And Final Fantasy 16 obviously took a lot of inspiration from Western fantasies. And I think that, combined with having just completed an experience that wasn't as satisfying to me from a gameplay perspective as any other Final Fantasy that I've played really has been. 16 is a D. You'd probably guess that it would fall into a D for me. Because, yeah, despite the fact that it tells a fantastic story, it's very gripping. And the combat is maybe a bit repetitive, but it is fun and it's flashy, especially the summon battles, right, where you're Ifrit and you're fighting the giant. Like, that's very cool, very showcase of the technology. Amazing. So I had a lot of very positive experiences with my time with the game, but it left me feeling depressed. So you lose points. I think you lose points with that, for sure. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is precisely what I wanted in a Final Fantasy VII re-envisioning. Remake is kind of a weird term for it, right? If you've played it, you know. It's not just that they add additional content and additional scenes in there to flesh out the world. There's actually more going on than just a simple remake. So I understand the people that were like hardcore stans of the original Final Fantasy VII, and they just wanted to see that, but in AAA 3D. Like, I get it. That's understandable. I can understand that. It's kind of like with Trails in the Sky at the first chapter. That is a one-to-one remake. That's what the fans of Final Fantasy VII who dislike the remake trilogy wanted. They wanted that kind of one-to-one remake. I get that. But I am a big fan of, the world of Final Fantasy VII and what they have been doing with it. So for me, it is unquestionably an S tier game. I've already played it several times. I will likely play Rebirth, which I'll just get out of the way, is everything I loved about 7 Remake, and so much more that I loved even more. It's just, the 7 Remake trilogy is just blowing my mind. And I don't know what they could do at this point to win over the people that weren't fans of Remake. It's going to be a case of diminishing returns, I think, with every entry. But I'm glad that they seem committed to doing this, because they are crafting the most AAA of AAA JRPG experiences that has ever been. And I love it so much. Bravely Default 2. So the Bravely Default series has been kind of a breath of fresh air for especially people like me that kind of grew up with the traditional turn-based Final Fantasies and really have a lot of affection for that kind of gameplay. They are, thus far, the games that I've seen, not revolutionizing JRPG storytelling. They are very traditional in the purest sense, right? They are there as a way of continuing the traditions that Square Enix has built up over the years without necessarily going to the extreme of it exists as a way for Square Enix to maintain those traditions while still letting a series like Final Fantasy experiment and just go all over the place. So I respect it a lot and enjoy it a lot on that gameplay side of things. The stories are good, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Bravely Default 2 has a bad story. It's a great story. But it's not going to blow your mind in the way that, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 or, Persona 5 Royal or whatever is going to blow your mind. So I think, all things considered, it's a B tier on this list, for sure. Tales of Arise. Tales of Arise, I know that among the fan community of Tales, I think it's come under a lot of fire, I think, just for being so different and not feeling as Tales-y as a lot of the other games do. It does have a pretty different combat system, even in a series that has some significant variation in the different styles of combat they use. Like the combat in Tales of Graces F, for example, and the combat in Tales of Berseria or Tales of Exilia, very, very, very different, like feel and even mechanics, right? But Tales of Arise is drastically different than even any of those. So I can see some of the issues. I didn't mind those. Like, that's not an issue for me. The issues that I have with Tales of Arise, when comparing it to the other best games on this list, is that the story is just very Tales. And to me, I don't think I've had a Tales storyline that has risen above like a B rank, held up against the broader JRPG, not just this list, but like the broader JRPG probably. Like, at best, a Tales game has had a B-level storyline for me. They don't hit those emotional highs. They're very good on character work, and this one is no exception, but it's a little bit lower than most of the others. I would call it a C on this list. Persona 5 Strikers is a lot of fun. It is a Muso game, so action RPG. I like that it was basically a continuation of the Persona 5 story. To the extent that matters, right? Like all the Persona games, with the exception of like 1 and 2, which they haven't really touched since back then, but all of the Persona games, they take place in the same world. Like, we know that, like in Persona 4, you visit the school from Persona 3. In Persona 5, I think there's posters up of Rise from Persona 4. She's a pop star. So like they take place in the same world, but it doesn't really matter because if there is some broader overall story, we don't know what it is. So the fact that Persona 5 Strikers is a direct sequel, I mean, it's the same characters going on a new adventure. It might as well be just like a standalone adventure. But you already know all the characters, and that's fun. So I would say if Persona 5 Royal is an A on this list, then Strikers, I would say, is maybe a C. It's still quite good, but it doesn't hit the heights from a story perspective that 5 Royal does, nor, I would say, is the combat as fun. I'm not as big of a Muso guy. If you love Muso games, you're probably going to put this the opposite that I did, but I'm just not a huge Muso guy, so the combat being this kind of over-the-top action is not really my thing. So, C. Octopath Traveler 2. I put Octopath Traveler 2 in a D because it did not expand enough upon the Octopath Traveler formula for me to want to play it. I started it out and was into it for a little while, and then as time went by, I was like, I've already played this game. This is just Octopath Traveler, but better. And that's not really what I was looking for, I guess, in the next game in the series. And that's why I think I like Octopath Traveler 0 so much, is it takes that formula and expands on it in some really interesting ways and does something that you can tell is at its core Octopath Traveler, but it's something different with those systems and with that formula. So Octopath Traveler 2 to me is a miss just because it didn't experiment enough. It was too safe of a sequel. I feel the same way about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I loved Breath of the Wild, had a blast with Breath of the Wild. I think I maybe got 6 hours into Tears of the Kingdom, maybe a little farther. And I was just like, I don't want to do this. Like, I did this for dozens and dozens of hours and had a great time, but like, I want something different, I want something more. And I just wasn't getting that from Tears of the Kingdom. So I think that's just sort of the way I am when it comes to sequels. If it's not, especially if it's like not compelling me with like a big story, then it's harder for me to get on the hook. And Octopath Traveler 2 does have compelling short stories, but none of them that I experienced were enough to like drag me along for the entire duration, which I'm sure was like 80 or 90 hours because those games are not short. Speaking of Octopath Traveler, let's get Octopath Traveler 2, or not 2, 0. Let's get Octopath Traveler 0 up there. Why don't we? Let's do it. I would probably call it an A. I would call Octopath Traveler 0 an A because, like I said, it experiments with the formula. It does way more than 2 did with that formula. And I really enjoyed having like a central narrative that, everything was kind of woven around this central story. Didn't love having a silent protagonist, but even just having a character that is constant between all of the stories was, I think, a big win. The downside, I think, to the short story format that Octopath Traveler uses is that you may have all these characters, but they're only utilized in their story. They're not showing up in each other's stories because the game can't account for who you have with you at any given point. You might not have found that character yet, so how could they be a part of the story? They can't be a crucial part of any story that isn't theirs. And Octopath Traveler 0, despite it being a silent protagonist, I feel like is a step in the right direction because it does have a character that is involved in all of these stories. So, A. Trails into Reverie. Trails into Reverie is an A-tier game. It's the culmination, right, of the entire first chunk of the story. And I mean, maybe you want to call it the first half. I don't know how they're balancing it out, how many more entries there are going to be on this other side of Reverie. But if we say the first half of the story, it's kind of the pivot point, right? There are a lot of characters here, and everybody's stories are not necessarily wrapped up, right? Like the story continues, and these characters are still part of this world. But there are a lot of things wrapped up and kind of put to bed so that the story can continue in the direction that it's going. Trails into Reverie does a great job of mixing up the formula with the Trails series and doing something a little bit different. And, I don't necessarily need Trails games to do things different, contrary to like my Octopath Traveler or Zelda feelings, because the narrative in the Trails games is so strong that I don't care. Like, just give me more of that and keep the story coming is fine by me. But, they have the most refined version of the combat system to date in that game, right? The Trails Through Daybreak, which I'll get to here shortly, that moved the combat system forward quite a bit into a place that I like even more. But for its time, Reverie was the pinnacle of the combat in Trails, and arguably in JRPGs in general, just like an incredible combat system. And yeah, I'd say it's an A game. Trails Through Daybreak, since I already brought it up, that's going to be an S tier for me because holy cow, the things that this game does in terms of gameplay and in terms of the story, I love it so much. It is precisely what I want from Trails. And Van is an incredible main character. I love the whole cast. The entire cast of the Calvard arc is just the best of the best. They are delightful. They are just so good. Trails Through Daybreak 2, I would probably call it an A as well. And I think it's just because I don't have the benefit of hindsight yet to look back on Daybreak 2 and understand what it was doing, right? So a lot of people complained, I said earlier, that people were complaining that it felt like the plot was spinning its wheels. It does kind of feel that way because we don't have the context of what comes after it. I feel like Daybreak 2, and from what I've heard from people talking online without spoiling things, it does sound like Daybreak 2's plot, the way it's laid out, the things that happen do matter. It's just you don't find out about it until Trails Beyond the Horizon. So I have a feeling if I were to do something like this again in the future, Daybreak 2 might rank higher for me on the story side. But because I don't have that context yet, I think Daybreak 2 falls a little bit short of Daybreak 1. Atelier Yumiya. Atelier Yumiya is very good in all but combat. Well, all but combat in presentation of the character. What am I trying to say? It doesn't have an English dub, and that really bugs me. I feel like that is holding the series back significantly. A much bigger audience should be playing these games, but the fact that it's in Japanese only with subtitles is a turnoff for a lot of people. I know in like the kind of like super weeby JRPG anime culture, it might sound weird to think that like the lack of a dub would hold somebody back from playing something, but like it's true. It does. Like there are a lot of people out there in the subculture around that embraces the Atelier series right now, of which I consider myself part. But that subculture is not that big. And there's no reason that a game that's as good and fun and just like a delight to play as the Atelier games, there's no reason that a series like that shouldn't have a much bigger audience. So the lack of a dub, I think, does that. And, people might argue, well, it used to have a dub and it didn't pay off because the series didn't grow or whatever. I don't know the sales figures. I don't know what a difference it made. I think that at the time, back in the day, the marketing was not on point, was not bringing in the right people. I think the gameplay needed time to evolve and get better and more addictive. I think the series, especially as it exists today, would really benefit from a wider audience because I think it's ready for it. And I think that the marketing could be massaged in such a way to make it more appealing to a broader audience. But without a dub, I don't think that it grows much beyond the core audience that it has. But I'm part of that audience. I like it a lot. I think it's great. I think that is it an A or a B? I would say B. I would say B just because it's pretty brief and the story feels incomplete, and it's because it's the start of a new subseries. They're going to be telling more of the story in subsequent games, I'm sure. So I would call it a B. I would similarly put Wrestleriana, the Red Alchemist, and the White Guardian in a B as well, but maybe a notch below. If there were categories within each of the letters, I would maybe just notch it a little bit below just because the story wasn't as interesting to me. I did like the combat quite a bit more in Wrestleriana because it's the very cool turn-based, very flashy, very cool, and I just really like it a lot. Doesn't have the exploration that Yumiya does, and the exploration in Yumiya was a lot of fun, big, giant open world to run around in, and you get a motorcycle, and that's cool. So, Wrestler, they each have their strengths, and I would love to just see those two games come together and make the perfect Atelier game. Maybe Yumiya 2 will incorporate more of that good stuff from Wrestleriana, and vice versa. So, Visions of Mana. Visions of Mana is beautiful. It is gut-wrenching. It is just, or maybe heart-wrenching is more the word. Gut-wrenching implies that it's gross, I guess, right? Heart-wrenching. In that it is emotionally gross? No, that's not right. It's a very emotional game. It is. It hit me very hard in some very real ways. And the combat is fun. The world is just beautiful, running around in this, not exactly open world, but very huge open zone areas that you can run around in and explore and fight enemies. It is a brilliant game, and it apparently didn't sell all that well. I don't know what people are doing, why they are just turning a cold shoulder towards some of these incredible games that even companies like Square Enix that typically you would associate with playing it safe. And maybe you'd argue that a new Mana game is safe, but I don't know. Mana hasn't really been a thing for a long time. And this was the big effort to bring it back, and it's really disappointing that it didn't get more attention because it is so good. It's very good. I'm going to call it an A. I'm going to call it an A on this list. It's an A. It's a solid A. Oh, I realized I did the other Trails games. Oh, no, I've got two more I have to do. Let's do the other two Trails games. I think Cold Steel 4 is an A. And it's only an A because I think by the time I got to 4, I was experiencing some real Cold Steel exhaustion. Keep in mind, prior to this, the longest game or the longest arc in the series was Sky, which had 3 parts. However, the third game in the Sky series had a different main character. So we really were switching up our main characters more frequently. And then suddenly we get to the Cold Steel arc, and Reen is just the guy for so long, because for whatever reason, I think the voice actor in Japan was popular, and Reen just became a very popular character there. And they are, Falcom are driven by the winds of popular opinion as much as any company is, right? So they stuck with Reen for probably longer than maybe they should have. Still, it's a Trails game. It's still fantastic. It's beautiful. It is intriguing and exciting, and I adore it. But it's held back from that top S tier level just by a little bit of Cold Steel exhaustion. So, I'll admit that there's a little bit of that in my opinion of Reverie as well, just because, again, Reen's not the main character of Reverie, but he's one of them. And it's like, let's give the poor kid a rest. Let him take a break. Trails in the Sky First Chapter is an S-ranked game on any list, not even just this list, any list of video games, of entertainment for me. If I were to rank all the best movies and TV shows and books and video games that I've consumed over the last half a decade, Trails in the Sky First Chapter would still be an S tier for me. It is brilliant in every way. It is the epitome of what Trails can be and I think should be. And I sincerely hope that they keep these remakes coming, because I would love to see every other game up through Daybreak, because Daybreak is using the same engine, but like every other game in the series remade with this engine, with this graphic style, with this level of attention to detail and just obvious love that was put into it. I just love it. East 10 Nordics. I feel like that's probably a B. Yeah, because I would... Actually, no. I think East 10 Nordics would be a C, and East 9 Monstrum Nox would be a B. And if you ask me, depending on the day, I might put East 8 at an A or a B. It's going to fluctuate. And like I think I implied earlier, my feelings change on the East games as time goes by. I have not nailed down my favorite East game, and this will change again in my heart of hearts as the months go by. But right now, I feel like East 9, I just really enjoyed the story so much more. And East 10 was cool. I liked the story in East 10 as well, and I liked Karja a lot. And there was some interesting mysteries. I think they tried to have a similar kind of cool mystery at the center of it, like they did with 9 and with 8, honestly. But the central mystery of it didn't quite grip me as much. And the naval combat was cool, and it was probably the best implementation of naval anything that I've played in a game. That being said, I don't love naval combat navigation in games all that much. If it's like a world map and I'm taking a little boat from one town to another or whatever, that's fine. But like when naval mechanics are a part of the game, I'm not as hyped about it. So I think that's why it would fall a little bit lower than Monstrum Nox for me. I would put Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, I think it's an A. Like, I was finally able to understand and appreciate how good Final Fantasy Tactics is because of the release of this game. For years, I would hear people talk about how great it was, and I think I made it like an hour and a half. When I played the Ivalice Chronicles version, I was surprised at how quickly I got to the part that was the farthest I had ever seen. I was like, oh, I really didn't play much of this game. Like maybe 90 minutes of this game. Maybe. And it really just like blew the doors wide open for me to be able to enjoy it. So if you have ever been on the fence about Final Fantasy Tactics, like it's something you feel like you should like or you want to like, and it hasn't gripped you, then you should try Ivalice Chronicles, because it, for me, was the thing that allowed me to actually really engage with and enjoy Final Fantasy Tactics. So check it out. Harvestella is eternally an S tier game for me. I can fully acknowledge that, it's a AA game. Like I said earlier, it's a AA game. The combat is a little stiff. The graphics, the polygon count is not going to blow anybody away. But it more than makes up for those kind of shortcomings just with the music and the art direction and the story and the characters. And it's just such a beautiful game. And there's a little bit of farming in it. If you like farming, you can do a little bit more. You could spend a little more time on it. I didn't spend that much time on it because I'm not crazy about farming. In real life or in video games, I'll be honest with you, I've never had a garden because it just doesn't sound like fun to me. So Harvestella is my eternal S tier. I love it so much, and I really want everyone who likes JRPGs to try it, because I think it is much more likely than not that you will like it if you try it. Blue Reflection's Second Light is, I would say, an A tier. Yeah, I would say it's an A tier. Again, like maybe I would even say held back a little bit by the fact that, it's a Gust game and they don't tend to have English dubs anymore. Having only Japanese as the language choice is a negative in my opinion. So it's a little bit hard for me to be as enthusiastic about it, but like it is a brilliant masterpiece of a game. And like I said before, if you are turned off by the fact that it's like magical girls or whatever, like I understand that. And for a long time, that's why I didn't play any game in the series, because I was like, that doesn't look like it's for me, right? But it is actually just a brilliant piece of work, and you should really consider trying it. Listen to some of the music, see if that hooks you. You know, like watch some gameplay footage of like the battle system, because it's so kinetic and tactical and interesting. Like just check it out, because I do think it would have a broader appeal to it than it would seem that it would. Dragon Quest 1 and 2, I'll rank these together, and I think I can pretty safely put it in the A tier. Yeah, I think it's an A to an S. I think S would be 4, 2, and 1 would be an A. So Dragon Quest 2 is an S tier adaptation of that game. I loved Dragon Quest 2 to begin with, played it on the Game Boy Color, and was just really impressed with like how story rich it was given its pedigree, you know? Or not really its pedigree, but just like its age, right? How old it was. And even the NES version, right? Like I played a little bit of the NES version just to get a sense, and I was like, well, this would have really surprised me if I'd played it as a kid. But the changes they make to the story and the characters and the combat and everything, the exploration, into just blew me completely away. It is incredible. And 1 is very, very good. There's not a lot to 1 to begin with, so they do add quite a bit to 1 to beef it up. It's still very short, you know, a dozen hours or so, which is fine. That's not a negative, but like there's not a ton of story. You don't have a party. There are new characters introduced that sort of fill that role sometime. You don't control them, but like they will interact with you as you go on the adventure. You'll meet up with them, and you'll have these sorts of interactions that you would otherwise probably have with a party, but you know, have these characters interact with. But I think just the additions to 2 and just the interactions and the character work that were done with the characters in that story make that an S, and I think 1 is an A. I would put them collectively at an A, but a very high A. Very high A. Finally, Expedition 33 is, you know, it's an S tier game. I know that the discourse has shifted a lot on the internet because the internet hates joy, and just like everything there has to be something wrong with everything. And as soon as Expedition 33 started getting like awards buzz, it was like, oh, down with the foreign game. And then people that like it, they don't really like JRPGs because this is not made in Japan, and they're tourists or they're cultural appropriationists or what. Everybody just chill out and have fun. Why can't we just have fun? Let's just have fun. Life is so much better if you let it be. Anyway, Expedition 33 is just a work of art. It is beautiful. It's, you know, visually beautiful. The music is gorgeous. The characters, the performances, the combat is so addictively enjoyable. Like, I never was the best at parrying. I was okay. You know, I made it through. But, you know, if you spend time with it, I think you can really get good at it. And I could see that it's just such a satisfying thing when you parry something, especially like a big multi-tiered attack from a boss, and you parry the whole thing. You just feel like the biggest badass in the world. You feel like on top of the world. And no other game in recent memory has given me that feeling. Not to mention the story. Now, for a long time, I was like, I am so over the discourse around the story, because there was a lot of like, especially around the ending, where it's like one group of people on the internet were gaslighting another group of people on the internet. And I think it was the fact that it was like more in the early days when the game first came out. And I think it was more the people that kind of rushed through the game. They had thoughts that differed a lot from those of us who took it a little bit slower and thought more about it. And now the tide has shifted a little more to where my perspective on it seems to have a lot more of a voice. And so I feel a little more seen. But for a while there, I just felt like overwhelmed with people, I don't know, with just I don't know. It was a very questionable time for me as a fan of this game. Yeah, it was odd. But like I said, I think that the discourse is rotten to an extent now because of all the accusations of like people being tourists or whatever. That's silly, but that's not really about the game. The discourse around the game and the story and all this stuff, I think, is evened out and is a little more like palatable than it was. But yeah, for a while there, I was just like kind of sick of hearing about it. But enough time has passed. I'm back on board, and I just think it's brilliant. So I don't know, you guys. Like, this is looking at this list. I tried to be harsh because I had the stipulation in place that none of these are bad. These are all the best of the best, and I'm just ranking the best of the best in order of least best of the best to best of the best. And I feel reasonably comfortable with this. I'm looking to see if there are any that I regret putting where they are. No, I don't think so, honestly. I think they're all, maybe I'd bump East 10 up to a B as well, but considered 9 a little bit better. Maybe I'll do that. Yeah, I feel, that was maybe the only thing. Yeah, I feel pretty good about this ranking. Yeah. Anyway, what do you think? I'm going to put a link to this tier list that I've created down in the description. I would love it if you would fill it out and share it with me on social media. You can find me on like X, Twitter, at _justthegems, and on Blue Sky at justthegems.net. And I think that's it. I'm on Instagram, but I don't know if you want to share it on Instagram. It's _justthegems there as well. But yeah, let me, share it with me on social media. I'd love to see how you would rank these games. Let me know where you agree, where you disagree down in the comments as well. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this. I know this was a long one. Holy cow, you guys. So I don't know. I mentioned on social media, and if you don't follow me on social media, give me a follow. But I did mention on social media that my computer, I don't know if you can see it, is dead right now. And I'm doing everything content-wise off of a little Windows tablet that I have from work. It's like a work Windows tablet. And it's not, this is a monster, and this Windows tablet is not great. It's a good Windows tablet, but it's nothing to compare to that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take a little break from content because I can't do as much, because it's just too hard to do as much with these big files, and like it's just not strong enough to run all. And then here I am doing like a 50-something plus minute long video ranking the video. I hope that you enjoyed this. Please, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Check out my podcast. Link in the description for that too. And anyway, I gotta edit this thing. It's gonna take 1,000 hours because of this machine I'm using. But see you on the other side, I guess. Until next time. Bye.